Hello, this is Reindeer's Bees, and today we're going to talk about queen acceptance. So when I started 5 years ago, I didn't understand at all why queens were accepted or not. Like, what are the factors that go into queen acceptance or rejection? Many people every year use mated queens to requeen their hives or make splits. It's very common in beekeeping. Thousands of them are rejected and killed by the bees every year. And they're really expensive, so this is a big deal. So I can think of 5 factors for queen introduction. There are probably a lot more, but these are the 5 ones that I thought of when I was thinking about queen introduction. These are the things I wish I knew 5 years ago when I started. So incoming food, probably the most important one. Well, top 2 I'd say. Hives are much more likely to accept that mated queen if they have a honey flow coming in, or if you're feeding them sugar water. They're just a lot more agreeable when they have food coming in, and it shoots up your acceptance level. So if you're making a split and you want to add a mated queen, it's best to feed it before you add the queen, and this will help your chances of her being accepted. It really can make a big difference. That being said, feeding sugar water can go very badly as well for queen acceptance, because if you start robbing, then your queen acceptance will shoot down. I have never had this experience personally, but Bob Binney says that your queen acceptance decreases a ton if robbing starts in your yard. So that's something you also need to think about. Make sure you don't spill any when you're feeding them if you want to install that queen. So the second one, I think, these top 2 would be my most important factors, is the age of the bees. So people don't really think about this, but worker bees progress jobs as they age. So they start by cleaning out their cell, then they become a nurse bee, then they make wax, become a guard, then lastly a forager. And so bees from like 3 weeks old to 6 or 7 weeks old are a forager. And so the more foragers you have in your hive, the more old bees, the better chance they won't accept your queen. The old bees are the ones that are going to sting you. For whatever reason, they don't want to accept that new queen. So those are the bees you have to worry about when it comes to queen acceptance. So if you have a huge, strong hive that has a huge foraging force, then they're much less likely to accept your new mated queen if you wanted to requeen them than your tiny little colony with 2 frames of brood. They're much more likely to accept that new queen. So make sure that you're being smart about which hives you choose to put mated queens in, because if you're requeening, the hives have a way less chance of being successfully requeened if they have a large foraging force and a lot of old bees. So if you want to requeen a big hive, then I suggest you move it 15, 20 feet away from its original spot. That way, all the foragers, they're going to go back to your old spot and they're not going to find the new hive. The new hive now will have only the young nurse bees and less bees in it. So you can go in, kill the queen, and requeen them if you need to. So that's a tip for doing that. One of the reasons a lot of queens don't get accepted as well is, let's say your hive, for whatever reason your queen dies, they make queen cells. The queen hatches, the virgin queen, and she goes out on her mating flight. But she never comes back. About 20% of the time, she's not able to find her way back after the mating flight. That happens, it's normal. Then, beekeeper comes back, checks, doesn't find any egg. They go to the bee supply store, buy a queen, and when they come back and install the queen, the bees don't accept her and they reject her, because all the bees left in the hive at that point, since it's been a long time since they've had any brood being laid, like 30 days maybe. All the bees are really old, and so those old bees aren't going to accept your new queen, so you're wasting your money. So that's why if you have a queen that, or a hive that doesn't get a queen back, you want to add new brood and probably move it 10 or 15 feet away to get rid of those foragers. Then you have an actual chance at getting the queen accepted. Once she's accepted, you can move them back to the old stand and it should be fine. So the third factor in queen introduction. So I think the 3, 4, and 5 are less important than the first 2, but they're still good things to know. The longer the queen is in the cage, the better chance she has at being accepted. So the bees need to get used to the new queen's pheromones. And so the longer she's in that cage, the better chance she has at not being rejected and killed and being accepted into the hive. I know I'm really antsy about it too. I really want to get that queen in there, get her laying, whether it's a package or a split or anything, you want to get her in there, you want to get her laying. But it's more important to protect your investment by waiting a couple extra days than just, throwing her in there and having her killed. So it's worth it to wait a couple extra days. Like I'd suggest, if you're using a wooden cage that has corks on both sides and candy on one side, you leave both corks in for, maybe 4 or 5 days. Then you take out the cork and let the bees chew her out through the candy. So that gives the bees about 7 or 8 days to get used to that new queen. So this can be very important and save you a lot of queens and a lot of money. So if you're using a JZBZ cage, the plastic ones, you can make some queen candy. It's really easy. You just mix corn syrup and powdered sugar, and then you stick some extra candy on the end of the queen cage too. And it takes them some extra time to chew out, because what I found with the JZBZ cages is they chew them out like in a day or two for whatever reason. So that's how you should delay the queen's introduction. Just give her those few extra days. The other factor to that is if you're a more advanced beekeeper and you feel comfortable handling queens, you can use a pushing cage. So a pushing cage is about 10 centimeters by 15 centimeters. It's 1/8 inch hardware cloth, and you bend it to have corners. I'll link a video up here of Richard Noel. Gus Mitchell also has one. And what you do with that cage is you push in take the queen out of her queen cage, and you get her under the hardware cloth. You push it into the comb, and then you have some hatching bees and food under there. All the bees that hatch under the cage will only have had that queen their entire life. They won't be used to the old queen. So those new bees will instantly accept her and feed her with the food that's under the cage. And after 4 to 7 days, you can pull off the cage and all the bees will accept her because she's already laying. That's a big factor in introduction of why queens are rejected, is because she hasn't been laying and they were used to a queen that was laying. So the pheromones aren't right. So the fourth factor for queen acceptance is queen cells. So if the hive has queen cells present when you're introducing the queen, which most of the time they do, they're less likely to choose your mated queen. Most of the time they still will choose your mated queen because bees realize that that's better, and so they'll take that mated queen over the queen cells. Let's say you kill the queen 24 hours before you install the new one. That gives them a long time to start making queen cells. So they already have queen cells when you put her in, and so that makes them less likely to choose your queen. The way that Corey Stevens does it, I'll link his channel in the description, is he makes them queenless a week before. A week after he kills the queen, he goes in and he destroys all the queen cells that they've made. And at that point, all the larvae left in the hive are too old for the bees to make queens from. So then the hive is basically forced to choose your queen that you install on that 7th day or dying. So they will almost always choose that queen. I think he said he gets 90+% success with that. So fourth factor is whether they have queen cells or not. So that's something important to think about. So the fifth factor, you can't really control it, but I figured I'd mention it because it's a huge part of queen acceptance. So Bob Binney is the one who brought this to my attention. He has a video on it, and he also did a presentation at Hive Life about it. He said it really matters how long the queen lays before she's put in a queen cage and sold. So if most commercial queen producers only let their queens lay eggs for 2 to 3 days, and then they cage the queen. What should happen is they should make sure the queen lays for about 10 days until she has capped brood, is generally a good rule. And that way she's built up her pheromones and she's more queen-like when she's introduced. Her behavior is different if she gets to lay for 10 days rather than only 2 or 3 days. So she needs to build up her pheromones and start acting like a queen. So then if you let her lay for 10 days and cage her, she's like, I can't remember the stats from his video, I'll link it up here, but it was much more, I think it was 20-30+% more likely for the bees to accept the queen that was able to lay for 10 days rather than 2 days before she was caged. So that's really important. So ask your queen producer, how many days was this queen laying before she was caged? And if they don't have a good answer for you, maybe you should find someone else. But just know what you're getting, and the quality of the queen can be largely dependent on if she's able to lay those 10 days. I think Bob said that like those 10 days are so important that she may just never be as good of a queen as she could have been if she was allowed to lay 10 days rather than 2 or 3 days. So it's really important that you know who you're getting your queens for and what their practices are. So I hope this helps you get your queens installed in 2023. I wish I knew all this stuff when I was a beginning beekeeper 5 years ago. They don't really talk about it in bee class because, well, it's kind of complicated and you have to really understand the bee's biology to understand this. So I hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe, comment down below. Follow me on Instagram at Reindeers Bees, and I'll see you in the next one.